Welcome to the Wine Library. My name is Sam Doyle, along with my colleague George Fever over here on the right. Today we're going to be talking about something that not only is our staff together passionate about, but I feel like the world is really coming behind. I'm going to let George kind of intro us into what we believe is probably one of the best vintages of German Rieslings in probably the past close to 15, 20 years. George?
Yeah, I started hearing about this vintage back in May when I found out that I was going to be buying the German wines here. I was very excited about that because I hadn't been paying attention to German wines closely in a number of years. And I got the chance to taste a broad swath of an importer's book. And the wines were just so vivid, luminous, and beautiful. I said, there's something going on here. Then I just started to look, and the hype was all over the place from the few people who tasted it. So, digging in deeper, this is an amazing vintage that could be the best vintage in 40 years, and certainly has the chance to be as good as the 01s, which is the vintage that I remember being so fantastic, and where 75% of my knowledge of German wine came from the 01 vintage and all the wines I bought for myself. So, without further ado, no one knows more about German wine than Mr. Gabe. Gabe, what do you want to tell us about the vintage in general and Kruger rum from specific?
Sure. Like George was saying earlier, the 2015 vintage is definitely widely considered by critics and wine lovers alike to be a great vintage, a historic vintage. Talking to producers like Helmut Dunhoff, he compared it to the 1971 vintage, which in the 70s is just a remarkable vintage. The 1990 vintage has also been discussed, and of course 2001. 2015 is a little bit different, I think, in its character than 2001, in that it has really a broad-shouldered character. It's ripe, it's very dense. It's a Pradecat vintage. It's a great vintage for dry wines and high Pradecat wines. But it also has higher acidity. It was a warm vintage. During the growing season, growers were kind of worried about it might be too hot. People were comparing it to 2003, but things started to cool down. September, they were getting enough rain just when they needed it, and it turned out to be an absolutely perfect vintage. The wines that we're looking at today kind of represent different regions: the Pfalz, Mosel, Naha, and the wine we're going to be tasting is from the Naha. This is a region that sits just south of the Rheingau. It runs on the Naha River, which kind of meets the Rheingau at a little village called Bingen and Munster Saarsan, which is where this is from. It's a warmer part of the Naha, perfect for dry wines, but also great for Pradecat wines like Cabernet. This is the Munster Rheinberg Cabernet from Kruger rum. Young grower, Georg Rumpf. He's actually just had his first child. He's in his early 30s, but he's really taken this estate to the next level. He's farming some fantastic sites: Pittersberg, Rheinberg, Dautenflamser, Grand Cru sites in this village. The Naha is a really special region because you have 180 different soil types. When you're talking about the Mosel, basically you're talking about slate, red slate, gray slate, weathered slate, Devonian slate, essentially. In the Naha, you have quartz, volcanic elements, tonschiefer, slate, all these kind of different soil types. So here we have a lot of quartz and a bit of slate in this vineyard.
Well, let's get a whiff here. I'm not going to say sniffy sniff.
So kind of explain, compared to this region, the more popular regions like the Mosel, you have the Rheinhessen, things like those areas, where to me going to the Mosel is all about huge slopes, reflection of the river on these slopes, the angles, the pure minerality that comes from those things. Where places like Rheinhessen, more hills and more sunlight, what are the different areas do you feel in a vintage like this really affect the wine?
Sure, I think the Mosel is known for really steep slopes, as you said, reflection from the Mosel River. The best sites are generally on the water. The Naha is a little bit different. One grower said that the Naha really plays the middle ground between the Mosel. They have the crispness that you can taste in this wine for sure. This kind of high acid, mouth-watering acidity, and the richness of the Rheingau, which, if you look back 100 years, that was the most popular, most aristocratic wines there. It also faces a large river, the Rhine River, and there are steep slopes that you get a reflection, kind of like the Mosel, but it's full south, so you get a bit more warmth and not quite as much of that kind of crunchy, light acidity. So the Naha kind of gets the best of both worlds here. It has ripeness, density, but also it's light on its feet. It has this kind of light Mosel-like acidity that kind of runs through off the core of all of the wines of Earth.
So I mean, when I smell this, I'm instantly happy. This puts me in my happy place. There's so much going on in German Riesling. There's a push and a pull in all different directions. Tension, acidity, beautiful fruit. I think that's what makes people in the wine business really excited about these wines. When a vintage like this comes around, it's just like a month of Sundays, and it's a gift that's going to just keep on giving. The 2015s, we're very, very excited about it. Sam, what do you think of this one?
I mean, this wine, Kruger Rump, one of my favorite producers, probably in Germany. I mean, I've been working with a lot of your wines in the past and other places that I worked at, and my favorite part about especially Cabernet Rieslings, Spätlese Rieslings, things like that is like, while there's a fruitiness, it's very tart fruited, it's not overly ripe. There's a confusion factor because this is a Cabernet Riesling which has residual sugar, right? And normally sweeter wines cause things more fruity, but it causes a confusion because the minerality is just so pure. I find the acidity, the minerality, that little bit of stone fruit on the back end in the 2015s, and this is Cabernet compared to Spätlese. How is it affecting the other levels, Ausleses and those things as well? Because we tasted some Ausleses that literally, I don't think I've tasted current vintage Rieslings as good as those.
I think it's a great vintage across the board, kind of like I was saying, in every category. I mean, the amazing thing about German wine is that it can run this whole spectrum. You can't point to another region anywhere in the old world or new that kind of runs this entire spectrum, where you have bone dry wines that are light on their feet, like a Cabernet Trocken, something like this, a Grosses Gewächs, which is essentially an Auslese Trocken, a very ripe, full-bodied dry wine, Cabernet, or fine herb wines just under Cabernet, which have just a little bit of residual sugar. Cabinets, which generally about 30 grams of residual sugar, a bit more, 30 to 40. Spätlese, Auslese, Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese, and Eiswein has this entire spectrum of flavor in terms of the amount of residual sugar. True Cabernet should be a wine that you can just really drink. 7.5, 8.5, 9.5% alcohol. Wines in this style, they generally have about 35 to 40 grams of residual sugar per liter. That's not per bottle. If you're thinking about that kind of, oh wow, that sounds like a lot of sugar, comparison to orange juice or apple juice, which have about 87 grams of residual sugar per liter, or a fresh apple. You think about a fresh apple, generally has about 19 grams of residual sugar. So in a bottle of wine that has 35 grams, it's about the same as an entire apple. It's a fruit sugar. It's not a, you can't really put it in the same category as candy or cake. It's not like that. These are wines that are crisp, easy drinking, delicious. Cabernet is a wine that you can drink at lunch, have a couple of glasses, and it's low alcohol, so it's not going to impair you.
And then, Gabe, if for some reason somebody bought a case of this and forgot about it in the basement for 10 years, how would they feel about it 10 years later?
I think these wines will hold up really, really well. I think 20 years is no problem for Cabernet. I've had Cabernets from the early 80s, especially from a great vintage like this, 1983 Cabernets from the Mosel, and they hold up beautifully. I mean, I think that aged German Riesling is another really amazing. It's an amazing experience. It's not like any other wine. When you have your first Cabernet or Spätlese with 20 or 30 years of age in the bottle, it's a different kind of experience. The sugar that you have in a Cabernet or a Spätlese starts to fall away, and what you're left with is a really beautiful structure, and kind of the flavor profile of the wine changes. It goes into this more savory, more mineral direction. Really pretty.
I mean, just kind of jumping off that too, I find that there's so many people out there that just kind of throw Riesling to the side for one specific reason. There's so many of these Rieslings that are made out there that are off dry just to make everyone happy, the person who just wants to drink the sweet wine, things of that nature. And recently, I was blind tasting the city the day that I saw you guys, and someone blind tasted me on 1992 Auslese Riesling. Vintage, mediocre, not crazy, not great, not amazing, but you do find a complexity and the savoriness that, in my eyes, I mean, if you're a full-bodied red wine drinker, you can actually be intrigued and really break apart the different structures and the different things in Riesling. It's not about that fruit sweet bomb at that point. I think there's a lot more that comes out of it that people are kind of letting go to the side, just assuming that all Riesling's going to be sweet, especially Trockens and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think that that's a common misconception by, not just wine novices, but wine lovers, that Riesling is a great variety that's about fruit. Really, intrinsically, Riesling is about minerality. And you see that in Grosses Quebecs, you see that in aged wines. Many of these wines, especially the category of Auslese, this is the category of German wine that's meant to age. They're meant to age for 40, 50 years. These are wines that just continue to improve. They're some of the greatest wine experiences I've ever had in my life. But, I think drinking young Auslese, while it can be really exciting because the wines are so powerful, really they need a couple of decades to come into their own.
For sure. And I agree. The more they stay, the more minerally they get. The less the fruit. Kind of like red wines too. Red wines, the fruit kind of backs out, and you get more of those kind of earthy secondary notes. I find that Riesling, it's like overwhelmingly crazy how good they get the older they get. But the plus side is you can keep a wine for 20 years. It's still not going to cost you $400 to have a wine like that. I bought 30-year-old Riesling in a store. Just Spätlese Riesling that was killer for $40. And I think that these are the kind of styles of wines that someone who's getting into wine, maybe not willing to spend the crazy money, but want to learn secondary, aging and what happens to wine over time. I feel like Riesling's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and this vintage, these wines are luminous, they're full of life, they'll live forever if you want them to, and they're just so delicious you won't be able to keep them. So you're crazy not to jump in on some 2015s.
We haven't seen demand for wines like this for a very, very long time. I think 01. 01 is the vintage. 05 a little bit. I think that this is a vintage that has a little bit of a different character. 05 was really ripe, really rich, very dense. 15 has a lot of density, a lot of body, but it also has a really good amount of acidity. And I think that's what separates this vintage. And I think that's why people like Jancis Robinson or John Gilman from the Cellar have been talking about this vintage as one of the greatest vintages that they've tasted in 30 or 40 years. John Gilman said it was the greatest vintage that he's tasted in his time tasting German wine, which is almost 40 years, I believe. So,
and the timing of the vintage on the general world wine scene is pretty perfect.
Yeah.
And this is the right time for Germany to shine in terms of what else is shining out there at any given moment.
Yeah,
it's like Germany has the stage at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Yeah, for sure. And I think that as Sam was saying, this is a perfect category of wine for somebody who's getting into collecting wine, because there is nowhere else on earth where you can buy Grand Cru top class wine that doesn't cost very much money. When you compare it to the greatest vineyard in Germany, or a great Grand Cru in Germany compared to its counterpart in Burgundy, you're talking about the bottle costing 10% of what its Burgundian counterpart costs. So it's about quality. These wines are, German wine is all about high quality from this level of producers. The country as a whole produces a lot of wine, but the stuff that makes it to the U.S. is generally really high quality. So when you see 2015 on the label from a producer that you recognize, or maybe you don't, it's definitely worth a try. The wines will surprise you, I think.
And we're definitely going to want to show off the Kruger rum, because it's beautiful today. I can't, I haven't spit anything. I don't care.
That's low alcohol.
Yeah, it's low alcohol, 9%. You can operate heavy machinery.
I mean, and like you were saying, Jancis Robinson, all these guys, and reading the reports, it's rare how perfect a translation of excitement goes through, professionals, through the bottle and into the glass, to the point where, I read this, I get so excited, and then I taste them, and I'm even more excited. And I think that's what we're finding right now.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you hear a lot of hype and then you taste the wines and the wines live up to the hype. And I think that's what we'll see with the 2015 vintage. And I think
the hype is real.
The hype is real. And the last couple of vintages haven't had the kind of press. I think that there are some very good vintages from the 12, 13, 14 vintage, but 15 overall, the entire category, the entire country, the level of quality is just so high. It's really high.
And there'll be some interesting grapes other than Riesling too. I haven't even dipped into Baden, Noirs or Scheurebe, Weissburgunder, what have you. I think it's a pretty safe bet. 2015s across the board, even into Austria. Correct.
Absolutely. 15 in Austria.
That's a discussion for another day, but keep that in mind. Austrian Gruners and Rieslings are showing spectacularly in 2015 as well. So it's all good if you like these wines. 2015, if you're new to them, it's time to dive in. Gabe? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Close your good.
Thanks.
Well, goodbye from the wine library. We hope to see you soon. Talk to you later.